Good morning. It's Wednesday, March the 31st, and this is The Drill. Thank you. And now the daily declaration for spiritual warfare. I will make the crooked straight and the darkness light. My child, I have taken hold of your hand and will guide you. Hold firmly to my word, for it is the message that gives life. Encourage my people and give them comfort. I selected and sent you to bring light and my promise of hope to the nations. You will give sight to the blind. You will set prisoners free from dark dungeons. I will lead the blind on roads they have never known. I will guide them on paths they have never traveled. Their road is dark and rough, but I will give light to keep them from stumbling. Prayer declaration. Lead me and make your way straight before my eyes. Make darkness light before me, and crooked things straight. Touch me to light the way for the blind, and to bring hope to the nations. Give me the treasure of darkness and your riches, which are stored in secret places. Strengthen me so that men may know there is none beside you. You came to reveal the true light that gives light to every man who comes into the world. And that was the daily declaration for spiritual warfare. And when I come back, I'm going to be talking a little bit about partisanship and about AOC. All right, so let's see, I'm trying to get this squared away here for AOC. I'll just go ahead and, I had it pre-recorded, but I'm just going to go ahead and speak it more extemporaneously. So I was listening to Hugh-Hewitt, and he and Fred Barnes, who's a writer, were talking about AOC and whether or not AOC was realized or thought about details of her various schemes and plans. And they were basically snickering at her for not having any of those details, any mastery of the details. And they can snicker at her, but she's going to end up snickering at them. And he who laughs last laughs best, because she doesn't have to have the details. Her plan is to have Hugh-Hewitt and Fred Barnes flesh out the details for her. Notice the dynamic of what has happened with AOC is that she comes out and makes this arbitrary claim about a New Deal. And she calls it the Green New Deal. And it's really nothing more than a sweaty little fantasy in which all the buildings in the United States of America are laid low and rebuilt in her image. And then we end up with some sort of a train to Europe. Who is it you think is going to realize that dream, that sweaty little fantasy? Do you think that AOC is going to put on some gloves and pick up a hammer, and the bartender from Brooklyn is going to go ahead and build all of this? Hell no. She's going to count on Republicans to do it for her. She's going to count on conservatives to do it for her. How do you get them to do it? By simply, the way you start is getting Republicans to discuss and argue with her about a pipe dream. It's a fantasy. I mean, there's no word to describe how unrealistic her sweaty little fantasy is. But by describing it, by arguing about it, by talking about whether or not there's enough money to do this or whether or not it's practical, we help realize her dream. Ayn Rand was right when she said that every arbitrary statement must, not can be, must be ignored. Because if you don't, you simply help your enemy, and make no mistake about it, AOC, with her sweaty little fantasy of destroying everything in this country, is our enemy. And when you acknowledge and reify her arbitrary statements, you aid your enemies. The left is full of dreams, and that's the dynamic of it. They create the dreams, they come out and proclaim these dreams, and it is the right that reifies them. We end up realizing their dreams by arguing with them, arguing about them. We come out and state our objections so that the left can then go ahead and modify their dreams, and we end up with something we don't want. It may not be exactly like their dream, but we end up with something we really don't want. We end up, for one of the things is legalizing the recreational use of marijuana. And what's on the heels of that is legalizing the recreational use of cocaine and heroin. That's what's coming in California. They're putting it on the ballot, the government. The government is putting it on the ballot. They're going to ask voters to decriminalize cocaine, heroin, and psilocybin. Ridiculous, beyond ridiculous. But the more that we argue about it, the more we reify it. It has to be and should be roundly ignored. And other than that, if it shows up on the ballot, not only do we vote it down, we immediately recall those politicians that put it on the ballot. I'd also like to say that the left is always about perfection. They're always about paradise. That's why they always move so slow, because they got to get everything done just so. It has to be done perfectly. The perfect is the enemy of the good in the left's book. So, California's been ruled by the left for how many decades now? Where's paradise? Where is it? I don't see it. I don't see paradise. I don't even see us close to it. Okay? And is the legalization of marijuana, is that going to create paradise? Is the legalization of cocaine and heroin, is that paradise? Are we going to be at paradise when we get that done? So what has the left accomplished so far in the decades that it's been in business, so to speak? Let's see, it banned plastic straws. It banned plastic bags. It legalized getting stoned. And trying to think of what else. There's some other petty little thing that they did here in California recently. They legalized or restricted the use of. But it's petty, small little things. One of the cornerstones of a socialist government is free health care. They promised it when they were all running for office. We're going to give you free health care. We're going to give you single payer. Single payer, because health care is a right. Well, where is it? Where is it? Where's single payer? Nowhere to be seen. They're not even discussing it. They're busy talking about other petty, small, little things like banning plastic straws, banning plastic bags, and going ahead and letting everyone get stoned. And this happens because the left doesn't know what to do when it's in power. It has all kinds of models for revolution. Saul Alinsky, Karl Marx, etc., Mao Zedong, but they have no ruling mandate, no ruling template. Marx was silent about what to do once you've won the revolution. He just said, well, there'll be some kind of a world government, and which will eventually wither away and will be all a bunch of anarchists. And that's it. So whenever the left comes into power anywhere in the world, they don't know what to do. They have no clue. So that's why you end up with ridiculousness and sadness, the sadness of Venezuela. The left is really good at creating revolution, being an opposition group. But when it comes to wielding power, using that power to create anything positive, they're lost. They're so lost. And that's what we have in California, is that the AOCs of California can't come up with anything other than banning plastic straws and plastic bags. So, and as far as AOC herself is concerned, again, she makes a statement, comes up with a dream, and by resisting that dream, the very act of resisting that dream instead of ignoring it, we help her realize her dream in some way, shape, or form. Because I don't think that AOC really expects that she's going to have that anybody's going to lay low. And as a matter of fact, she said so herself, that it was just basically some sort of a guideline or whatever. But she figures if Republicans take her seriously and start arguing about it, the merits of the meritless, that she's going to get something. And that's all she needs. All she needs is a starting point. And we're off and running in the direction that the left wants us to go. So don't argue about it. If it's ridiculous, turn away. Walk away. Ignore it. Ignore the ridiculous. Ignore the arbitrary, because to do otherwise is counterproductive. Will end up hurting you or coming back to bite you in the ass in the long run. I was listening to Hugh-Hewitt, and it occurred to me, because I've decried neutrality. Hugh-Hewitt is the king of the neutrals, and he thinks it's clever and smart and shrewd to be neutral. And it just occurred to me, well, what else is there? What if I'm going to advocate something instead of just being a critic? What is it I'm going to advocate that would be, in essence, the opposite of being neutral? Partisanship. What I'm really demanding of Hugh-Hewitt and everyone else is be partisan. Stop and think about it for a second. During the Revolutionary War, was that a neutral event? Or was that a partisan event? What about the Civil War? Wasn't that full of partisanship? How about World War I? How about World War II? Weren't those partisan events? Or were they nonpartisan or bipartisan? Or were they neutral events? There was no neutrality there, was it? How would we have been able to become a nation? How would we have been able to heal our own, fight our own battles and fight battles overseas by being neutral? How could we do that? I don't see a way. What I see is that when you become neutral, you help your enemies. And our enemies today are the socialists that are represented politically by the Democrat Party. And being neutral allows them to do as they see fit. So how does one resist? Simply by being partisan. There's book after book I've looked in Kindle, and there's book after book I looked up partisanship, because I wanted to see if there was anybody who written anything in favor of partisanship and explaining why it's good to be a partisan. And every single book I've seen decries partisanship and proclaims partisanship to be a negative, a pejorative, a bad idea. It divides the country. And I'm the only one, apparently, in the United States of America that recognizes the value of being partisan, and that in order to get things done, one must be partisan. That if we're going to thwart the left, we have to be partisan. There's neutrality isn't going to cut it. But there's so many people like Hugh-Hewitt that don't recognize that don't see the damage that they are doing to this country by going out and broadcasting to millions of people their neutrality, and in so doing, advocating neutrality. And then the same Hugh-Hewitt is going to sit back and scratch his head and say, gee, how come things aren't getting better? Why aren't people motivated? I hear it every day on the radio. Heard it yesterday on the John and Ken show. I don't understand why more people aren't upset. I don't understand why more people aren't doing something about this. Now, with John and Ken, they are partisan. There's no doubt about it. If you want to hear partisanship in action, listen to the John and Ken show, KFI AM 640, and it runs from 2 o'clock to 6 o'clock Pacific time in the afternoon. Listen to them. You hear partisanship in action. But most of the other people, like Hugh-Hewitt, that's busy being neutral, giving you the facts. I'll give you the facts and let you decide, and then can't understand why they're not motivating anybody. They scratch their head. Even Rush Limbaugh would do that. I don't get it. I don't see how come nobody's getting excited. How come nobody's doing anything? Because you're being neutral. Nobody ever started a revolution with a news broadcast. Doesn't make any sense. It's partisans that lead revolutions, whether it's a revolution or a counter-revolution. Look at Castro. There's nothing neutral about Castro when he started his revolution. Again, our revolutionaries are biased and partisan. There was a book that looks like it might be interesting about Madison. The 3 lives of James Madison as a patriot, a partisan, and I forget what the president. So, in which they seem to put partisan in a positive light or in a positive way. So, again, if you're not, the opposite of neutrality is partisanship. If neutrality is bad, partisanship must be good. Thank you. A little bit more on partisanship is that what just occurred to me was to drive the point home, look at a ballot. Because what I'm claiming, I've said that there's no such thing as neutral. That means we're all partisan to one degree or another. And so if you doubt me, think about the ballots. When you go into a voting booth to vote, there's no neutral option. If you're going to go out, whether you're voting for a candidate or you're voting over a particular issue, in California we have ballot initiatives and referendums, and so nowhere on the ballot does the option neutral appear. You're either for or you're against. You're either going to vote for President Trump or you're going to vote for Joe Biden. There's no neutral option. It doesn't exist. It's a 0. Thank you. Also, I can't be overemphasized that the essence of being a true conservative is making the presumption for the status quo. Ayn Rand used to sneer at that, but it is absolutely vital that people understand that that's where you start every argument. Every argument, every debate, and politics is nothing but argument and debate about change. And that you start every argument, every debate with the status quo. Otherwise, you're lost. You have to understand, what is the status quo? What are we doing now? So the latest thing is gun control. So the best way to handle that when you're confronted with a gun control argument is when they say, well, the Democrats want increased gun control or gun safety or whatever. I can come out and say things are fine the way they are. We don't need any more gun control because we already have it. We already have gun control. What do we need with more gun control? Because the idea is to put the left in the position of proving it, not assuming, which is what they're doing now. They make the presumption and they try to do that as a matter of psychological power. They think that that's going to bully and intimidate you into giving way, to supporting it or at least standing aside and getting out of the way. But the way to support any type of request for change is to ask yourself and ask your opponent, what are we doing now? What do we do about immigration? What are we doing now? What are we doing now? And we make the presumption for that particular thing unless there is an obvious case for change. What we've got going on, for instance, at the border now screams for change. There's an obvious case for change at the border. And one of the things, guidelines for deciding what kind of change to make is to look to the past. What have we done in the past? Have we done anything in the past that has been effective in promoting sane immigration? And yes, it is. And where did we find that? In the Trump administration. We put up the walls, we finish the wall, and we go ahead and make sure the people that are coming here for asylum aren't let loose in the United States while they're waiting their asylum hearing. They stay in Mexico. And we also go to the countries that are involved in this and with a little bit of carrot and stick action, discourage those governments from sending their people, the Hondurans, the Guatemalans, El Salvadorans, etc., to the United States, encouraging them to keep their people at home. So, but we always start with the status quo. As a conservative, the left is always presuming change. We presume the status quo. We ask the question, what's wrong with the way we're doing things right now? Again, with gun control. What's wrong with the gun control we already have? What's wrong with the registration we already have? The guy that went ahead and shot up the place in Colorado went by the laws. He went ahead and did his gun control thing. He went 6 days before and he registered and he went through all the paperwork and whatnot, and we still ended up with a disaster. We have also the left is silent on knife killings. We had a woman and her small dog that were murdered in Los Angeles yesterday, who was murdered in the street. A man was standing around in front of his car out on the street somewhere with a knife. People called the police, and he ended up trying to, or saying that he was going to kill a delivery driver. Then he decided that he went up to this woman who was walking her dog, demanded that she give the dog up. She did, and at knife point, and then he proceeded to start stabbing the dog. The woman tried to intervene. He started stabbing her, and before a delivery driver could he had no weapons on him, and so he tried to hit him with a rock or something. And I think the individual ended up committing suicide. But the point is that there's no outcry on the left about this. Death is death. Violence is violence, whether it's coming from the barrel of the gun or the tip of a knife. The problem, brings home the adage that guns don't kill people, people kill people. People with the intent to kill people. And that brings me to the end of another episode of The Drill. Be honest, be smart, be beautiful. I'm Ron, and that's The Drill.